Okay. So the practice has been pretty, I guess, consistent over the week. Nothing too major in terms of leaps or jumps or developments or things like that. Been pretty consistent with letting go and surrendering, and that producing releases of different kinds. I experiment a little bit with like whether it's just surrendering or letting go, or like altering a bit the way I'm oriented in terms of how I'm surrendering, and that produces different results. And yeah, there's some some ways of surrendering are like more are more like, how should I say, um, are more um, let's see. More prominently like noticeable in its like releasing effects, feel like a little bit more active or something like that. Some are less prominently noticeable, but somehow more uh, maybe deeper might be the word, or more comprehensive or something like that. Something like that. And then others are more, what was it? I just had it. Oh yeah, others are more like produce, or at least when sometimes a lot of the surrendering has just been like straight surrender, like um with an aim to like maximize the sense of release. That's been pretty prominent, although I have set aside time for uh, not having such a focused, purposeful time of surrendering. So during those times, it's more like I engage in more not tracking the progress, um, or letting the purpose be swallowed up by the surrender as the surrender comes. And like sometimes I tweak it here and there, but like those types of surrender are more, at least with the what's it called, the surrender where it's more um, where it's more is it, wait uh, oh yeah, not tracking progress is right. Where it's I'm more focused on like not tracking the progress, or like um, or even letting go of the ability to keep track or measure or something like that. And it's more like produces an effect of like less kind of caring. And it's less it's a state where there's less desire for change. Although when something resistant comes, that kind of disrupts that state and takes a bit of a little more surrender to return to it. And then there are times where it's more like focused on making it purposeless or letting the purpose be swallowed up by the surrender. That what's it called? It's not as uh, prominent in its releasing quality, but somehow it's like deeper in its surrender, sort of, and it's like so like something triggering or like resistant might come, inspiring resistance, and it comes for a little bit, and then it dissipates, and then there's no lasting like background resistance, I should say, or something like that. And then there are times where it's like it seems like to produce the most releasing results when I try to like identify like a thought pattern. Like oftentimes it might be something about the future, like, oh, I'm afraid of having an episode. And that's something in the future, and I'm like, okay, I let go of control. I let I let God handle the future. That's in God's hand. It's out of my hands now. And that produces a certain kind of surrender that's like more noticeably grieving. So yeah, it's been a lot of like different like experimenting and discovering different kinds of results. And I can't quite pinpoint one specific way of surrendering that's like the best way to do it like all the time. And at the same time, I haven't been getting much traction with the type of surrender where it's like it doesn't matter whether things are good or bad, like things could not change and you just still be okay. A lot of it's still like release phase. Yeah, it's feels good versus no, I don't really have a good grasp or sense of like the type of surrender that's like okay regardless of like whether things are good or bad. So yeah.
What's surrender?
What's surrender? Letting go of resistance.
Try again.
Try again. allowing.
Why are you smiling?
What?
Why are you smiling?
Why am I smiling? I was smiling. I didn't notice.
You grinned as you said it.
Oh, I don't know.
Almost as if you were pleased with yourself.
I don't know.
Better. Better. What's the difference between allowing and letting go of surrender? And letting go of resistance?
One is seeking to like get rid of something, and the other is like just being without any seeking to do anything specific.
Yeah. So what should you actually tweak?
Not seek to get rid of things.
Probably a good idea. If you want to stabilize surrender as a way of life, you have to let go of ways of surrendering. Feel out what surrender in general has in common, and just keep doing that. No matter what. It's not letting go of specific things, it's just letting go. If you base the quality of your letting go on specific things, it's not unconditioned, it's specific. That's the limitation of doing things with an intentionality or a particular result in mind. What you keep forgetting is that you'll be content, maybe even happy, even if you don't let go of all the tension and pain and anxiety and resistance and whatever. If you just let go, period. You're not trying to change the symptoms of your condition. You're trying to shift the cause of them. Because there's a common root that underlies virtually all of your resistance. And by giving up the short-term gratification of major and stimulating releases, which can be really cool, you allow yourself to hone in on something much subtler that isn't as obvious, that has way more of an effect on everything. The fool is enamored by quick riches. The wise man takes his time and builds essentially generational wealth that doesn't come and go. Do you actually want to surrender and be at ease? Or do you just want to release tension? When you've resolved that inner conflict, you'll find that your mind is a lot less restless, because what you also don't notice is that if you're constantly adjusting, that means that your mind can't sit still. It's not really giving into the process. After a certain point, the key isn't to shift the way that you're doing something. It's to just do it with more presence and continue to let it soften by itself. No matter where you start, you're going to face what seems to be some texture, some quality, and you're going to allow yourself to lighten infinitely through it. And that doesn't end. It doesn't matter how you start. It's about presence. If you want things to go deeper, then surrender more deeply. At a certain point, you'll have to surrender trying to adjust surrendering. So make up your mind as to what you really want. Whether you're going to settle for less that appears like short-term more, or whether you're going to, actually go for the gold that's backed by what you've been learning. Because your desire to constantly tweak, that's not based on what you've been learning. That's based on fear. That's based on resistance. And yeah, it's just a question of like what kind of quality results you want. So that's what I have to tell you about that. After you've stabilized surrender as a way of being, by going about it with purity, genuineness, to surrender for its own sake, then the ability to access and develop your system dramatically, that opens up a lot more. Because you're no longer the kind of person that brings along his limitations. By setting your mind completely free from the get-go, regardless of the condition of your body, your mind can fully soak into your body and empower it to change and heal much more quickly. Now, I'll put it to you this way. It takes 150 steps to stabilize long-term surrender. It takes 2 steps to get a momentary release of tension. If you keep on focusing on that which takes 2 steps to get a result, because there are 2 different paths, you never begin the path that's of 150 steps. They have to be walked back to back to back. You can't keep walking back towards the other direction. You never really make progress that way. Especially in this analogy, because part of it is surrendering intentionality and desire. And it's like, if you're saying that you're willing to surrender everything but that, then that's, where shit stops. You want this to get into your operating system behind the place where you kind of make your choices and how you make them, because that's what really alters you as an individual. Any comments or questions?
So what does that look like, surrendering for its own sake?
Why are you trying to imagine what it looks like? Why don't you experience it for yourself? Now, in order to ensure its purity, you let go of watching it too. You're not trying to keep track of the surrender or the quality of it or how you're doing. You're not looking for notes for your mind. You're not trying to analyze surrender, because if you are, you're not surrendering analysis either. And so you have to understand, this is not for the sake of your mind. This is just to experience what is. And as you let yourself surrender these subtler contextualizing dynamics of experience, you may notice that they accentuate and release subtler tensions than the grosser ones that you're used to focusing on. Not because you want to release them, but just because that's what happens when you allow yourself to surrender at subtler levels. You let the process do what it will, how it likes, what feels appropriate at this time. Because when you let go, the universe more fully takes over. And this is part of trusting the process, and that there's already a greater order to things already happening. That you don't have to finagle to try and find a better way. That if you let go and feel out the way things naturally go when you stop, that's naturally progressing in a better direction. And it's also ideal to just abandon trying to accumulate knowledge too. Meaning, when you hear words about these kinds of things, you don't try to map it and model it or imagine it. You continue to surrender, to stay surrendered through conversation, through all the things that you do. It's not something that you do with your mind per se, it's something that you do with your heart. You stop trying to grab onto aspects of the experience to fixate. or to reject, which is why I'm just like, no directionality, surrender directionality. There's non-linear progress when it comes to this process. Some days you'll find greater depth and robustness, others not so much. As you persist, you'll find deeper and deeper things that are accessed than you ever could have imagined through the approach of adjusting and trying to consciously find your way to something. You'll develop understandings about the way your body works best, the major limitations that had been holding it back, and dramatic refinements in the baseline operating of your nervous system, such that you start to deeply clean out the remaining residue and habit of stress. You don't want to dig a lot of different holes for water. You want one good well that gives you a consistent source of water. A well is a well. Surrender is surrender regardless of the way. Focus less on the way, just keep surrendering, including the conception of a way. As always, your sensory gives you feedback, but it gives you feedback without you needing to manage or worry how it's appearing. Simply to know that the more you let go, the more it clears up. If you seem to be stuck, rather than trying to find a different way to surrender, recognize what the stuckness is and actually surrender. Because I promise you, if you let go, it's not going to be a problem. If it's still a problem, it's because you're holding on. So the answer isn't to shift what you're doing. It's to do it more fully, more completely, more comprehensively than you're letting yourself. It acts as feedback and it's showing you exactly where it is that you're holding. Given that all of this is rather intuitive and automatic, you don't even have to try to let go. Simply the recognizing the areas where you haven't and continuing to deepen into the allowing, into the surrendering, will allow that to take care of itself, not you. If you still think there are adjustments to make, you're still acting from the mind that is managing, controlling, and sees itself as separate from the flow of experience. Hence, it kind of fucks it up as a practice that particularly focuses on awakening. Make sense?
Yeah.
Any comments or questions on that?
No.
Cool. Now, when there's nothing to do and everything's kind of taking care of itself, you know, sometimes you have an inclination for fun, for exploring, for experimenting. At those times, it may seem natural to simply explore where you haven't noticed that you're holding and deepen what it is that you're already practicing. Further, taking that as feedback. Doesn't mean to find a different way or adjust. And also, it's not like surrender is a specific configuration of attention. Meaning, attention is also let go of. It can float from thing to thing. It has its own process of dissolution and relaxation as well. Because attention, for a lot of people initially, also has a lot of grab, a lot of fixation. But it's kind of like your system will automatically, just for fun, start debugging itself, honing in on specific tensions and feeling itself through it. That's the main point of me pointing out the nature of the infinite vastness of space last week. It's to give you a clear understanding of how tangibly, kinesthetically, your attention just works to resolve these things. Attention will take on many different shapes, subtler each one, to help surrender through specific things. The general gist of those is that it's going to become softer and more transparent, so that there's nothing that is resisting against the resistance. That is the main key. The warmth, the wonder, the glow is just a pointer to something that your system naturally clicks into when it's at a certain continuity of surrender. Your system literally starts to shine. If you call upon the glow, let yourself be marinated by it, it will give you certain kinds of satisfactions and fulfillments that have eluded you so far that will make you less prone, less interested in trying to manage the particularities of your experience. All of this is still done within the context of surrender. In these matters, it's not so much that you're fixing or adjusting to get a better result. It's simply that there are signs and conditions of better performance in terms of the body, mind, in terms of the nervous system. The purity of surrender is maintained for your spirit, so your awareness can let go. The understandings about the way that the body can shift and what allows it to function better is so that your body understands how to automatically take care of itself after/during surrender. So this knowledge isn't necessarily for you to apply or play with yourself, though you can if you're responsible and honest with yourself and not going to play that bullshit game of Joe gave me a little bit of leeway to do something outside of the context of pure surrender. Now let me go ham and use that leeway to continue fucking around and trying to clear up resistance. Ultimately, it's just you. You're the only thing that holds you back. You're the only thing that allows you to be. And yeah, within those few principles, that's it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell. Historically, I'll say, yeah, play around, try different things. It's a game. It's not so serious. And that's true. I'm just describing this way in particular for you because, you know, we've had certain conversations about this over and over and over, and I want you to really understand and get through this. Because, yeah, it's not like you're actually letting go of anything. You're just letting go of your attachment, you're letting go of your ideas. Everything that those ideas point to can still remain. It has its place, it'll function. You just don't have to take over for yourself. Like, you got to take the pressure off of you so that you can let go of you. So that when the you disappears, you understand what's actually going on. And controlling and trying and analyzing is something that you do. So if that seems to be something that you're holding on to, then it's probably a good idea to focus on letting those things go so that you can have a deeper surrender of self. What I like is the analogy of an unending sigh of relief. A lot of this stuff we've covered, it has more of a feel of we have a certain idea or intention, and it initiates a dynamic experience that doesn't have to end. If we don't stop it, if we don't contract, then, you know, all it really takes is surrendering once. You stay surrendered, and it just deepens. It becomes a way of life once you really, really let yourself give in. Yeah. For me, the sense of like, and the energy of that doesn't have to stop when you run out of air. It can continue deepening and flowing subtler and softer, even when the inhale comes out. You only worry about going along with the exhale because it's just a really good example of this like visceral relaxation response. To get deeper relaxation, you just go further. You don't start again, you don't shift the way you relax, you just go further. You just become more present, become more aware. So, yeah, there shouldn't really be a need for such a vast variety of different ways, save for the sake of play after you've realized that you don't really have an agenda and you're kind of just enjoying yourself. I explore on occasion different ways of relating to my body, to my senses, in order to allow for certain kinds of shifts. But I no longer care about what specific results I'm getting. It's not that I have to get these results. It's just that it's enjoyable for tension to be let go of. I function better as a person and as a teacher. And yeah, working with this doesn't arouse a sense of analysis or investedness in the outcome of things. Because it's not the things themselves, it's your relationship with them. And so if we're talking about the same thing over and over and over and how to do it well, but you insist on like doing it in a particular way, then we gotta let go of the thing in the way that we've been doing it for a little while so we can tackle this impulsive habit of kind of co-opting things for relative reasons. And so notice what, if anything, is on your mind right now. And it's funny because when I call attention to it, it actually tightens up because now you're focusing more on your mind. And I want you to relate to everything as sensory, everything's just sensation, everything's flowing naturally. And let yourself enjoy, like, sink into the release that comes with that. However subtle it begins. That's what you become more present with. That's what you melt into. That's what you develop continuity momentum with. However the experience is flowing. If you want a greater effect, you soften. You don't change the thing. You let go more deeply. Now, feel what happens when you label this experience physical world. And then stop labeling it. Just treat it as sensation again. Feel what happens. And then feel what happens when you manifest the question, what's the status of resistances? How can I let go of this particular resistance? And just noticing the feeling. And then letting go of labeling or worrying, and just sensation. Everything is just sensation. You have the visual sensory field, the flow of kinesthetic, bubbly, bodily felt sensations, thought sensations that are like little holograms of your senses. It's all sensation, all coming and going. Now notice what you feel when you intend to resist resistance. Go ahead and resist resistance. And if that doesn't feel too great, go ahead and stop resisting resistance. Just let it be. And as you let the resistance be, just allow yourself to accept, embrace, feel more fully everything that is arising for you. Because we're not here to critique, we're here to love, we're here to embrace. So embrace it. Embrace what looks like resistance on the surface, what we know to be sensation in the middle, and what's ultimately just vibration, movement, or space in the end. And what do you notice as we did all that?
I noticed the subtle pressures of, what's it called, when we, what was it? When we try to specify specific resistances to let go, and notice like the subtle increase of like pressures that accompany that, even though the thing did actually release and let go. And did you notice the increase of an openness or like a vibrancy in relating to sensations? Um, and embracing um, all things. Yeah, it was like
Mm-hmm.
very calm, mm, soothing.
Mm-hmm.
Soothing.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that when you focused on particular resistances, they release, but there was still a subtle pressure that came with it?
Yeah, I felt a sense of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you understand why I just walked you through that?
Not entirely.
What would you learn by walking through that? What does that teach you? What does that show you?
How different ways of relating can exist with surrender and or go against it or sabotage. Yeah, sabotage it, sort of.
I can see why you would think that. Okay. All right, so go back to relating to everything as sensation. And you felt what it is to put on different lens. Now, go ahead and take off the lens of sensation. Don't even look at it in terms of sensation. Don't look at it in any particular way. Just let whatever it is, we don't have a name for it, be. And then relate to it as sensation again. And then let go of relating to it as sensation. Don't relate. Just let it be as it is. Just experience. What do you notice this time?
There's a subtle pressure to relating to things as sensation, and the switching highlighted um, sort of like less pressure, more like openness of not relating in any particular way, and then the other way of relating sensation was like more vibrant, but somewhat more restricted, I guess. Less open.
Yeah. If you don't relate to it any particular way, it's not necessarily as flashy, but you end up getting more detail in the long run. Because it's almost like in order for things to be flashy, they have to be compact. When they're open-ended, when they're more spacious, it's kind of like everything has more space, so you can notice more fine-grained detail in the midst of it. But that's the point. It's not so much different ways of relating garner different results. It's that for me, and I should probably clarify this. Sensation is synonymous with direct experience for me. If it is what it is. I don't interpret things as sensation, they just are. Sensation is a way of talking about certain ways that what just is kind of flows and expresses. But the key isn't to relate or look at it that way. It's just that initially the looking offers insight into how it acts, how it behaves. But that's just it. Just knowledge of the flows of experience. Looking at things or relating to things as sensation is more liberating, more freeing, less pressured than most other things. So it's still pretty good. The key is to realize what is making the pressure happen. It's all in the way you look. The different thing about more direct methods to awakening is that instead of doing it under the context that we're doing something, we're just shifting the way we're relating. And that flavors and allows things to shift in a different way. But the ultimate insight and realization that's of the greatest value is if you don't relate to anything in any particular way, then freedom's already here. And kind of like opening up the floodgates and letting the water of freedom kind of like start to flow in to these places that had been blocked off because you didn't realize you were resisting. It starts to saturate you, to water you, to soak you. Just like a very big dry object that you throw into water, it's not going to get completely wet all at once, maybe on the surface, but it's going to take time for the water to soak into the depths, the inside. So you want to let it soak. You want to let it go deeper. The time at a certain point is important in terms of like letting yourself stay surrendered for longer and longer and longer. The act of adjusting and looking for different ways to surrender will create settled pressures, which will limit the water from getting into certain areas. Now, to not relate does not mean that the water will now get into those areas immediately. It just means that as momentum builds, the area will be available to finally be nourished when it's time. We don't surrender to rush or get faster results. We surrender because it's the most direct way to satisfaction. And it's a satisfaction that is independent of our conditions, pain, tension, anxiety, so on and so forth. Everything kind of takes care of itself thereafter. And if you paid close attention, you'll also notice that the pressure starts immediately when your mind even starts to formulate the concept of something. And it's that initial process of the that we're learning to stay surrendered with. Because if we stay surrendered, we do not feed these impulses. We can remain sensitive to when they're arising and allow them to relax before they fully developed into a constriction in the flow, which is a higher level of skill / mastery than practicing through the view of tension. You're training this to be natural and automatic. That's the other reason why we're not managing. You can't make something natural by practicing managing it or making it happen. You can only shift the conditions and understand what makes it arise naturally. Not relating to anything any particular way is what allows these qualities to arise naturally. You will always immediately get at least a subtle flavor of it. The rest is how much you surrender, how much you allow yourself to fully feel, accept, embrace whatever it is. But yeah, any comments or questions on that?
No.
Groovy. Then I suppose that's it for today.
All right.
Yeah. Look over this at your leisure. And just let yourself be simple. We're looking for less reasons to have our mind watching or doing anything. Because it's when the mind really melts into experience. It can't do that if it's hypervigilant. It's when the mind finally melts into experience that you start to really understand the nature of things. But until then, the mind is treating things as other. It's not fully letting itself be taken. So yeah, keep up the good work, and I'll catch you next time, buddy.
All right.
Peace.
Take care.